just editing. Today I'll be talking about video games. More importantly, the questions, what if video games never existed, and how would it affect us? First, I'll be giving you a brief crash course on the history of video games. 1947. Yep, the first interactive electronic display used for video games was made way back when in the era of World War II, just after, actually. However, the first video game developed for this thing was made way later. This thing being the cathode ray tube amusement device, CRTD, I assume. That's all for the 40s. It's 1947. It's experiment. 1950s. In 1950 to 1951, and throughout the rest of the 50s, video games were very much experimental. And featuring... And hadn't been commercialized yet, so this was featuring titles such as Bertie the Brain, 1950, and Nimrod, 1951, which, based on what I found, were made for the CRTD. 1958's Tennis for Two was the first video game made for the oscilloscope, and is considered the first even remotely entertaining game developed. And Tennis for Two, Pong, I feel like they're kind of similar. Maybe one Pong might have been inspired by Tennis for Two. 1960 and 1965. Now we're getting somewhere. Video games are almost ready for retail. 1962 leads to the release of Space War with an exclamation in the title. Anyways, remember this for later. 1966 to 1969. I don't know, I couldn't find anything. Fun fact, most of these discoveries were made by computer scientists and MIT. 1970s, Pong. That's right, the 1972, that one game everybody knows for being fun and really old, released. It was released as an arcade cabinet, which didn't do too well, but when it was released, when it was coded into the new, at the time, Magnavox Odyssey, it became relatively better received by the public, and people liked it. A year before the game Computer Space released, which was A, a cooking simulator, B, a bowling game, C, Space War 2, or D, Milk. If you guessed A, B, or D, you'd be unfortunately wrong, because in 1971, Computer Space released as an arcade version of Space War. And it didn't do well. In 1976, the first cartridge console was released, though, by Fairchild Semiconductor as the Video Entertainment System, VES. Later renamed to the Fairchild Channel F, F meaning fun. It was developed by a few people, and but most notably one of the first African-American game developers and engineers in that field, and the guy who came up with the idea of storing video games like an 8-track, which, if you don't know, are really old forms of storing music from like the 40s and 50s in like a cartridge form. Cassettes were better, they switched really quickly. And you got the idea when he was looking at an 8-track, so yeah. Unfortunately, the people aren't the best with new technology at this time. It was very new, people didn't understand it. They were naive, and they couldn't figure out how to enjoy the revolutionary games it involved, because it was tic-tac-toe, but it was cool because it was able to display tic-tac-toe in a way nobody had ever seen before. It wasn't a dot on a screen like the Magnavox Odyssey. It was actual tic-tac-toe. Also, they had a low budget, so this eventually led to its downfall. It did offer some pretty neat experiences with a few new programming techniques. So going back to that thing, it was revolutionary because they copyrighted something for a little while, and Atari worked around it, and they couldn't keep it. They couldn't keep up. It was like this, where they divide the screen into segments, and then they make it easier to program. Also, the first program controller for it was like a newer controller, new design. It was attached to the console in a weird way, though, and it was confusing for people. But hey, had an eject button, It should have been intuitive. It was more intuitive than the other consoles, but it was, I don't know, it was the Fairchild Channel F. What do you expect? 1979 offered the Fairchild Channel F Model 2, which had a better design and didn't have as many FCC issues. Fun fact, well, I got a few fun facts for you here because it's interesting. Fun fact, the FCC didn't like the first version of this because it was like messing with their waves and stuff, so they just put a big metal box inside of the case. And then the second one they simplified so they didn't need the metal box. Another fun fact, Jerry Lawson, the guy who came up with the idea for the cartridge, often displayed a message on screen saying, "Try again, turkey," if you lost a game. It was an inside joke he created amongst himself and his friends. It's meant as an encouraging message if you lose. It's also shows up in the Jerry Lawson Google Doodle game, which was a celebration of his birthday not too long ago, like 85th birthday in 2020 something, not too long ago. 1980s. Game consoles are a big deal until they aren't, with Nintendo moving from cards to toys to a couple consoles here and there due to a partnership no one really cared about, with horrible naming conventions. They were obscured, and I'm not going to dive into that really in this presentation. The video game crash. That happened. From 1983 to 1985, there was a period of time where parents didn't like games very much. They still don't, but not as much as they did. Like, they didn't... They're more considerate and tolerant of them now as they were back then. So, but they refused to buy consoles. Like, they wouldn't buy consoles out anymore. And that wasn't good for the companies. Atari, the 2600, Activision's Pitfall 2. Fun fact, Activision was actually one of the first, it was the first third-party, publisher of games. Like, they made games for the Atari. Because it was a bunch of people from Atari that weren't in Atari for anymore. I think they quit or got fired. And they founded the company. Activision the name was made because it showed up higher in the phone book. And it's really neat. They made a bunch of cool games. As you probably know, Call of Duty and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the Tony Hawk series of games. But that's off topic. That's irrelevant. The fact that parents weren't buying the games as much anymore is considerably fair. This is because the games at this point they weren't trash, but they were not the best. They weren't really going anywhere. The Odyssey was the only decent thing there besides what Jerry Lawson and the other guys made, but that flopped. And it was a dot that moved differently based on what number game card you have like you had in it. It also had like instructions like a D&D game. This was like complicated. Granted, the Atari consoles were nice and all, but they didn't have as much says. However, Nintendo made the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, back in 1985. I wonder where they got that name. Entertainment System, Video Entertainment, anyways. It was Nintendo of America's version of the Famicom, family computer from Nintendo of Japan. The NES didn't immediately flop because it advertised itself as an entertainment system, not a console. See the difference? 80s people did. The bigger, crappier cartridges looked to people kind of like a VHS, the VHS's cassettes. It was kind of like that kind of media storing system, except for it wasn't. Yay old Nintendo. So, anyways, gaming thrived after that, and it was happily ever after, right? Not really. That's a whole other can of worms, but that's where I'm gonna stop. And 1989, the original Game Boy was released. So, yeah. This will be where I wrap up my crash course. Any questions? No? Good. Save them for later. Moving on. Now the questions. What if video games never existed? How would it affect us? Well, the world would probably be a very different place. Movies, TV shows, and video games are the top medium for media and entertainment. Books are a lesser pillar in that, but that they are still a big four, but still there. Without video games, people would tune into movies and TV shows because there wouldn't be any other form of entertainment. I mean, unless you're in sports, but we're talking about media entertainment here. Um, like a recreational activity or a book, as I've said before, which many people would probably do, but movies and TV shows would become the industry leader for all media, the standard for all media. Fun fact though, video games are the most popular form of media entertainment. People would very likely exercise more and do better when it comes to health because there wouldn't be as much laziness. Like, would you rather sit down and watch something and feel useless for hours, around 2 hours, play video games, feel like you're progressing, or go outside and actually progress? 9 out of 10 times you'd probably be saying video games. With exceptions. But we're taking that out. So what about now, right? You don't want to get bored and feel useless, do you? I mean, movies are entertaining and all, but sometimes you get bored of watching them. So, what do? You'd most likely go out and do something. YouTube and Twitch would also be drastically different places, very drastically. No gaming content at all. You'll probably be left with just vlogs, reviews, and cooking channels. YouTube would definitely not be the second most trafficked website besides Google. Why? Because there ain't nothing to watch. Anywho, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Okay, bye.